Welcome, restless souls, to Carmen's Crypt. I'm Carmen Carrion, keeper of forgotten tales and curator of nightmares. You've wandered into my domain, where each week I unearth a fresh horror from the depths of human imagination. In these darkened halls, stories wait like hungry shadows. Each tale we've collected whispers of terrors both ancient and new. From crumbling mansions where something skitters behind the walls, to that strange text message you received at 3 a.m. from a number that shouldn't exist. So gather close. The candles are lit, the shadows grow long, and the witching hour is upon us. Are you prepared to face what lurks in the darkest recesses of Carmen's Crypt? Lock your doors, still your nerves, and remember, here, every fear comes to life. This is Carmen's Crypt. Your sanctuary of scares awaits. As my stomach rumbled, I suddenly remembered the only thing I like about the local mall, the food court. At this rate, it would probably be closed by the time Belle was done trying on everything in the store. I rubbed my growling stomach and slumped farther down into the smelly chair outside the fitting room, wondering how I always ended up in these predicaments. I had to learn how to say no. "Hey, Gabby." "Earth to Gabby." I heard Bellamy trying to pull me from my food fantasies. "How does this one look?" My mouth gaped as I took in the too short, too tight dress she was wearing, if you could call it a dress. It looked like a tank top stretched just beneath her backside. I tried to find a nice way to tell her that she looked like one of the working girls down on 6th Street. They were always out there on the corners after dark beneath the flickering lights with their short skirts and revealing tops, but I couldn't bring myself to say it so bluntly. Instead, I forced a smile and said, "It's definitely bold. Maybe try the blue one instead. I think it would be more flattering on you." Bellamy frowned at her reflection in the mirror, tugging at the hem that barely covered anything, and for a moment I thought she might actually listen to reason for once. "You're just jealous because you don't have the confidence to wear something like this," she snapped, her phone buzzing insistently in her hand. She glanced at the screen and her whole demeanor changed, a secretive smile spreading across her face. "Besides, someone thinks I look amazing in it." I raised an eyebrow. "Someone?" "Just this guy I've been talking to. He's been giving me fashion advice." She held up her phone, showing me a profile picture of what looked like a college-aged guy with perfectly styled hair and a charming smile. Something about the photo seemed off, too polished, like it came from a modeling website. "Belle, you don't even know this person. What if he's not who he says he is?" "God, Gabby, you're so paranoid. Not everyone online is some creepy old man in his basement. Derek is 22 and he goes to state. We've been talking for weeks." The name Derek sent a chill down my spine, though I couldn't say why. Maybe it was the way she said it, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "Have you video called him?" "We're meeting tonight, actually." She turned back to the mirror, adjusting the barely there dress. "He's picking me up after we leave here." My stomach dropped, and it wasn't from hunger anymore. "Bellamy, that's insane. You can't just meet some random guy." "He's not random," she interrupted, but her voice had a defensive edge that made me more worried. "Look, he sent me money to buy this dress. He wanted to see me in it." She gestured to the skimpy outfit. "Guys don't do that unless they're serious." The fluorescent lights above us flickered, casting strange shadows across the fitting room. Outside, I could hear the mall's ambient noise, kids playing, the distant sound of the fountain, security guards' radios crackling. But underneath it all was something else, a low rumble that seemed to come from the very bones of the building. "Belle, please. This sounds like every internet safety video we watched in school. What if—" My phone buzzed with a news alert. Local police report increases in missing persons cases Authorities advised residents to be cautious when meeting strangers. The timing felt like a sign. But when I showed it to Bellamy, she just laughed. "You're being ridiculous. What are the odds?" She was typing rapidly on her phone. "Derek says he's already in the parking lot. Black SUV, just like he said he'd be driving." Through the store's windows, I could see the sun setting, painting the sky in an ominous red. The mall was starting to empty out, stores pulling down their security gates one by one. Even the ever-present background music seemed to have shifted to something more minor key, more unsettling. "I have a really bad feeling about this," I said. But Bellamy was already heading to the checkout counter with the dress. As we walked through the nearly empty mall toward the exit, our footsteps echoed strangely. The few remaining shoppers looked tired, almost zombie-like under the harsh lighting. Near the entrance, an elderly security guard was reading a newspaper with the headline, "Full Moon Brings Out the Worst in People." "Look," Bellamy said, pointing through the glass doors to the parking lot. "There he is." A black SUV sat idling near the entrance, its windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Something about it seemed wrong. Too clean, too perfect, like it was trying too hard to look normal. As we approached, the driver's side window rolled down just enough for a hand to wave, but I still couldn't see the person inside. "Belle, please don't do this," I whispered, grabbing her arm. "Something feels off. Trust me." She pulled away. "You're just mad because no one ever asks you out. Some of us don't want to die alone, Gabby." The words stung, but my fear was stronger than my hurt feelings. As Bellamy walked toward the SUV, every instinct I had was screaming at me to run the other way. The parking lot lights were starting to flicker on, but several were burned out, creating pools of darkness between the scattered cars. The SUV's passenger door opened, and I heard a man's voice, deeper and rougher than I'd expected from someone who was supposed to be 22. "Bellamy, you look even more beautiful than your pictures." Just as the door was about to slam shut, a long, bone-chilling howl echoed across the parking lot. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Not a dog, not a wolf from any nature documentary. Something primal and wrong. The sound made my blood run cold and solidified every terrible feeling I'd had all evening. Without thinking, I sprinted toward the SUV just as it started to pull away. "Wait!" I shouted, banging on the passenger side window. "Belle, please!" The SUV stopped abruptly. Through the tinted glass, I could hear muffled voices, Bellamy arguing with someone whose voice was definitely not that of a 22-year-old college student. "Let me in!" I yanked on the door handle. "Bellamy, I'm not letting you go alone." The back door clicked open, and Bellamy's face appeared, flushed and annoyed. "Gabby, what the hell? You're embarrassing me." "I don't care. I'm coming with you." I climbed into the back seat before she could protest further. The interior smelled wrong, like mold and something metallic that made my stomach turn. Derek didn't turn around to look at me, but I could see his reflection in the rearview mirror. His eyes were too dark, too intense, and when he smiled at Bellamy, the numerous lines around his eyes were not those of a 22-year-old. "The more the merrier," he said in that gravelly voice that definitely didn't match his profile picture. "I know the perfect place for all of us." As we pulled out of the parking lot, another howl split the night air, longer and closer this time. Derek's hands tightened on the steering wheel, and for just a moment, he seemed nervous. "What was that?" Bellamy asked, finally sounding a little nervous herself. "Just coyotes," Derek said quickly. "Lots of them in the woods where we're going." We'd been driving for 20 minutes when Derek turned off the main road onto a dirt path. that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Tree branches scraped against the windows with sounds like fingernails on glass. Bellamy had grown quiet, finally sensing that something was off, but she was trapped between Derek and the door. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Derek laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "We're almost there, sweetheart. Don't worry. I have everything we need." He gestured toward something in his jacket. "Something to help you both relax." The way he said it made me reach for my phone, but there was no signal out here. My head was starting to feel strange, fuzzy around the edges. Had there been something in the water bottle he had offered us earlier? The SUV bounced over ruts and rocks, going deeper into what felt like wilderness. Through the windshield, I could see the full moon hanging between the skeletal branches of dead trees. Another howl echoed through the forest. This one so close it seemed to vibrate through the vehicle itself. "Okay, I think we should head back," Bellamy said, her voice small and uncertain for the first time all evening. "This is getting weird." Derek laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "We're almost there, sweetheart. Don't worry, I have everything we need." The way he said, "everything we need," made me reach for my phone again, but there was still no signal. The forest seemed to swallow all traces of the modern world. Finally, the SUV stopped in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. Derek turned off the engine, plunging us into darkness except for the moonlight filtering through the canopy. The sudden silence was deafening. "This is beautiful," Derek said, turning to where I could see his face for the first time. The moonlight revealed his true face, weathered, scarred, with eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. This was definitely not a 22-year-old college student. Just the three of us, no one for miles. Bellamy pressed herself against the door. "I want to go home. Now." "Oh, honey," Derek said, reaching into his jacket. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen." That's when I saw the knife. But what happened next? It gets hazy. I remember Derek reaching for the knife, and then everything became a nightmare of shadows and violence. Something massive slammed into the side of the SUV with such force that it nearly flipped the vehicle. The windows on Derek's side exploded inward in a shower of glass and twisted metal. Through the shattered opening came claws, long, deadly claws attached to arms covered in coarse fur. Derek's scream was cut short as something inhuman grabbed him and yanked him bodily through the busted car window. I caught a glimpse of yellow eyes and slavering jaws before Derek disappeared completely into the darkness outside. His screams echoed through the forest for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds before they were suddenly, violently cut off. "Run!" I remember screaming, or maybe Bellamy screamed it. Maybe we both did. The remaining windows of the SUV began to buckle inward as more creatures surrounded us. We threw ourselves out the passenger side door and ran into the woods, branches tearing at our clothes and skin. Behind us, the sounds of violence continued, but we knew they wouldn't last long. The forest around us was pitch black, except for patches of moonlight that created more shadows than illumination. Behind us, the sounds from the clearing continued, but I knew they wouldn't last long. Bellamy kicked off her heels and we ran into the woods, branches tearing at our clothes and skin. Every shadow looked like it could be hiding something with claws and teeth. Every sound made us run faster. "I'm sorry," Bellamy sobbed as we stumbled through the underbrush. "I'm so sorry, Gabby. You were right. You were right about everything." But there was no time for apologies. Behind us, the sounds from the clearing had stopped, and somewhere in the darkness, Something was howling, but it wasn't the same as before. This howl was different, closer. There was something out there hunting us. We crashed through the forest, Bellamy's bare feet bleeding from rocks and thorns, while I stumbled in my sneakers over roots and uneven ground. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching it happen to someone else. The drugs, whatever Derek had given us, made the world tilt and shift in ways that defied logic. I can't run anymore," Bellamy gasped, stumbling against a massive oak tree. Her perfectly styled hair was now a tangled mess, and her makeup had run in black streaks down her cheeks. "You have to," I panted, though my own voice sounded strange and distant to my ears. "They're still out there." The sounds behind us were getting closer. Heavy breathing, branches breaking, something large moving through the underbrush. But when I tried to focus on exactly what I was hearing, the details slipped away like water. I looked around desperately, trying to find an escape route, but everything seemed to shift and blur at the edges of my vision. That's when I spotted it, about 50 yards ahead, the outline of an old cabin. It looked abandoned, with broken windows and a partially collapsed roof, but it was shelter. Or maybe it was just shadows playing tricks on my drugged mind. "There!" I pointed with a hand that felt like it belonged to someone else. "Can you make it?" Bellamy nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I think so." We ran toward what I hoped was sanctuary, but the world kept tilting wrong. Behind us, I could hear something crashing through the woods. The cabin door hung open on broken hinges. We threw ourselves inside and found something to barricade the door. I think it was furniture, though the details are fuzzy. The whole place felt like it was underwater, sounds muffled and strange. Something heavy slammed into the door from outside, again and again. Through the broken windows, I caught a glimpse of movement, but whether it was human or animal, or just my terror-soaked imagination, I couldn't tell anymore. "The windows," Bellamy said, pointing to the broken glass. "It can get in through the windows." She was right. The windows were too big and too low to defend. We were trapped in a cabin that was more holes than walls, with something outside that seemed determined to get in. "There," I said, spotting a trap door in the corner of the room. "Maybe there's a basement." We pulled up the wooden panel, revealing a ladder that disappeared into darkness below. The smell that wafted up was musty and old, but it was better than staying up here. "I'll go first," I said, swinging my legs over the edge. The ladder was old, and some of the rungs were broken, but it held our weight. We descended into what looked like a root cellar, stone walls, dirt floor, shelves lined with ancient preserve jars. It was completely dark except for the pale rectangle of moonlight from the trap door above. We had barely pulled the trap door closed when we heard the cabin door finally give way. Heavy footsteps thundered across the floor above us, accompanied by snuffing and growling. Something was sniffing the air, tracking our scent. Bellamy and I huddled together in the darkness, hardly daring to breathe. Above us, the footsteps paused directly over the trap door. A drop of something warm and wet splashed onto my face. I looked up and saw a single yellow eye peering through a crack in the floorboards, staring right at me. The trap door exploded inward, and we found ourselves staring up at something that had once been human, but was now something else entirely. It stood on two legs, but was covered in coarse fur, with elongated limbs and a face that was part man, part wolf, part nightmare. It let out a bone-chilling howl that echoed through the small cellar, then reached down toward us with claws that gleamed in the moonlight. But Bellamy wasn't the helpless girl from the mall anymore. She grabbed one of the old preserve jars and hurled it at the creature's face with perfect aim. The glass shattered, sending the thing reeling backward with a howl of pain and rage. "The far wall!" I shouted, spotting what looked like another passage leading deeper underground. "There's a tunnel!" We crawled through the narrow opening just as more creatures dropped into the cellar behind us. The tunnel was barely wide enough for us to move through on our hands and knees, but it seemed to lead away from the cabin. Behind us, snarls and claws scraped against stone as they tried to follow. "Where does this go?" Bellamy gasped. "I don't know," I admitted, "but anywhere is better than back there." The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, but finally we saw light ahead. Not electric lights, but pale dawn breaking through what looked like another opening. We emerged into what turned out to be another old root cellar, this one attached to a long-abandoned farmhouse. "It's just storage," Bellamy whispered, looking around at the rotting wooden shelves and moldy canning jars. Then she spotted the stone steps leading up to what looked like cellar doors. "Wait, there! Those doors lead outside." Through the gaps in the old wood, I could see the first hints of sunrise painting the sky pink. "We can get out this way," I said, pushing against the doors. They were heavy and warped with age, but they gave way with a loud creak. We climbed out into the early morning air. The abandoned farmhouse stood like a skeleton against the dawn sky, its windows dark and empty. Around us, overgrown fields stretched toward a distant tree line, and beyond that, I could just make out the shape of a road. "We made it," Bellamy said, laughing with relief and hysteria. "We actually made it." But even as she spoke, I could hear them, distant howls echoing across the fields. The creatures had found our trail again, and they were coming. "We need to keep moving," I said, grabbing her arm. "The road is maybe half a mile that way." We ran across the open field, the sun not even high enough to cast our shadows. Behind us, the howls grew closer. Without the cover of the forest, we were completely exposed. Two figures running across empty farmland with nowhere to hide. Bellamy was struggling to keep up, her bare feet cut and bleeding, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The ridiculous dress that she insisted on wearing from the mall, that had started this whole nightmare, was now torn and muddy, completely useless in our fight for survival. "I can see the road," I shouted, pointing ahead to where asphalt gleamed in the morning sun. That's when Bellamy stumbled and fell hard, crying out as she twisted her ankle. I turned back to help her up, and my blood turned to ice. 3 of the creatures had emerged from the tree line behind us, their massive forms moving with terrifying speed across the open ground. They ran sometimes on 4 legs, sometimes on 2, covering the distance between us faster than should have been possible. "Get up!" I screamed, pulling at Bellamy's arm. "They're almost here!" But her ankle was badly twisted, and she could barely put weight on it. "I can't," she sobbed. "Gabby, I can't run anymore." The road was so close, maybe 100 yards away. I could see a car in the distance, driving along the highway. If I could just flag them down. "Leave me," Bellamy said. And for the first time since I'd known her, she wasn't thinking about herself. "Run, Gabby. Get help." "I'm not leaving you." But the creatures were only 50 yards away now. I could see their yellow eyes, their slavering jaws, the way their claws dug into the earth with each bounding step. Bellamy made the choice for me. She shoved me away with surprising strength. "Go!" I ran, hating myself with every step, but knowing she was right. Behind me, I heard her scream. Not the petty, dramatic screams she had made in the mall when her favorite store was closed, but something raw and terrified, and final. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I reached the road just as a pickup truck rounded the bend. I threw myself into its path, waving my arms frantically. The truck screeched to a halt, and an elderly farmer jumped out. "Jesus, girl, what happened to you?" I was covered in blood and dirt, my clothes torn, sobbing hysterically. "Please," I gasped. "Call the police. Call everyone. There are things in the woods. My friend." He helped me into the truck and handed me his phone. As I dialed 911 with shaking fingers, I finally looked back across the field. The creatures were gone. So was Bellamy. The police found Derek's SUV, of course, and what was left of him inside it. They found the abandoned cabin and evidence of a struggle. They even found blood in the field where Bellamy had made her last stand. But they never found her body. And when I tried to tell them about the creatures, about the hunt through the woods, they exchanged those looks that adults give each other when they think a kid is lying or crazy. The official report said that Derek Thompson had attacked us. That much was clear from the physical evidence. But everything else, they said, was trauma-induced hallucinations. The drugs they found in my system, combined with the shock of witnessing violence, had made my mind create monsters to explain what it couldn't process. "It's common," the therapist told me later. "The brain protects itself by transforming unbearable memories into something symbolic. You created these creatures because the reality of what that man did was too horrible to face directly. But I know they were real. Every full moon, I feel the change starting. My teeth ache, my vision sharpens, and something wild stirs beneath my skin. The scars on my arms burn like fire, and I find myself drawn to the woods where it all began." The therapists think I'm healing, but they don't understand. I'm not the same girl who ran screaming from those creatures. I'm becoming one of them. I'm becoming a predator. And so, dear listeners, we emerge from another dark corner of Carmen's crypt. But remember, the horrors you've heard tonight are merely echoes of the terrors that await in the shadows of your own mind. If you enjoyed your stay in the crypt, why not invite a friend to join us next week? After all, fear is best when shared. Leave a review if you dare, or share your own tales of terror on my social media. Who knows, your nightmares might just become my next story. Until next time, keep checking under your bed. And remember, in Carmen's crypt, every fear comes alive, and no one is truly safe. Sweet dreams, if you can still sleep at all.